Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Dojo Live. Today is Tuesday, May 3rd, 2022. This is Tulio Siragusa broadcasting from Southern California. And joining me today is Kim Lantis in Hermosillo, Mexico, and our guest, Joe Gagnon, who is the CEO at One Up Health, joining us from Katona, New York, my old stomping ground there in the Northeast. Looking forward to speaking with you, Joe. Thanks for being with us.
Oh, what a pleasure. Really look forward to the time together today.
So we're talking about healthcare today and specifically how to make it better. And we'll go into that a little bit soon enough. We'll go and dive into this topic, see what we can learn from Joe. But before we do that, let's get to know our guest a little bit. Joe, if you could please introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself. And then we'll find out what One Up Health is all about. I love the name, by the way, One Up Health.
Yeah, we're very happy to be at the top of the list when you list us out. So I always love this question because I sort of try and frame it with three questions that I think are worthy of all of us to try to answer in our lives. One is, who we are, what's our purpose, and what's our legacy going to be? And I think there are these questions that just take a long time to answer because for so much of our lives, we're just sort of focused on just getting stuff done, whether we're in our 20s or 40s or wherever along the line. And somewhere, if you have a wake-up call like I did at one point in my career where I was very successful, I realized that I hadn't had a rich enough life. It was fine to have family and a great job, but there was more. And so I would sort of define who I am now as a explorer, an adventurer, an entrepreneur. And why I say that is that I'm always sort of intently curious and bringing a lot of courage to sort of the journey that I'm on, which is go try things. Don't be afraid of doing them. And in so doing, there's just this opportunity to probably get more out of life than most would. And so I like to fancy myself, a creator. So like I've been a blogger for 10 years and a podcaster for 2 years. And I wrote a book all about this idea of living a high performance life. I've sort of entertained myself with endurance athletics. I've done over 85 marathon and ultra marathons. I've sort of pushed the envelope on the physical side and on the business side and find that there's a real synergy when you engage and embrace life at a very deep level. So I'm getting my money's worth while I'm here.
I love it. You've done some hardcore skiing too, like adventure skiing, right?
Yeah, there's been a lot of different kind of activities that sort of a bit of, if you ask me to do it, I'll do it. Actually, this year I did a 300-mile expedition race over 70 hours across the state of Florida, which combined canoeing and biking and trekking. I've done other ultra endurance races of multi-day length. And so, it's there's a moment where you find out, what you're made of when it gets a little bit dicey, but that sort of connects to the same idea of being an entrepreneur and being in the healthcare industry, with an idea of transforming the industry, from a startup company that we were 2 years ago. And I feel like, I've practiced a lot of what that journey is like personally. So then it helps you professionally as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So do or die means a lot to you.
Right.
Well, you know what? I always think like there's so much that when you're a writer, you write about, but one of my most recent blogs was quitting or continuing to go. They both hurt. So you might as well keep going rather than quit. It's hard, but that's okay. That's what makes life interesting.
Just the same way, if you're listening, you could be saying, either get motivated to get out there and do something, or you could be saying, man, I am lazy. It's all context.
Well,
all right, let's talk about.
We're not going to pick on anyone, but we know this. There's always more opportunity than most of us probably go after.
Let's talk about One Up Health. What gave birth to this idea? What is it that you guys do, and why do you do it?
So I think what's fascinating is that in the past 25 years, most industries that we work and are familiar with have changed and transformed. The retail industry changed, travel and transportation changed, the financial services industry changed. They all changed based on technology and data access. So once we opened up access to richer and deeper levels of data, our experience has changed. Online ordering on my phone, I can find out if a black t-shirt's at REI today and I can go over there and pick it up. That was an impossibility 25 years ago. Well, fast forward, we're in the healthcare industry, a $3.8 trillion industry that, will self-admit that it's not doing as well as it should. The measures of quality or risk or care are just not hitting the goals and objectives we have. And at the end of the day, the customer, here, our patient experience just isn't where it should be. So what we thought is the way, rather than going and tell the industry to change and you need to operate better, what we basically said was if we can start at the infrastructure level and build out a new ability to access data in a standardized way and provide tools that would allow for insights and computability against that data, and we could share that across all the stakeholders in the industry, that we should start to be able to operate better with transparency, accuracy, timeliness, real-time data. Now we start to think differently about how we could operate the industry.
Nice. Okay. Well, let's see what we can learn today. If we could go ahead and introduce the topic. And in the interim, I'll mute myself so you guys don't hear the landscapers in the background.
That's all right. My dog will probably bark here in any moment.
Not a problem.
So great. We've got today, Joe, as you've chosen, transforming healthcare data, and more specifically, how will FHIR interoperability transform healthcare? Now, pre-show, I already learned what FHIR is. That is Fast Healthcare Interoperability Resources, and it's FHIR, not FHIR. People, do not make my mistake. So let's start there. Why did you choose this topic for us today? And if you could expand a bit on FHIR as well.
Yeah, I think sometimes what you don't see is, sort of why change happens. And the reason I thought we should talk a little bit about FHIR is that it is a technology that's been sort of in development for almost 40 years. But in the past few years, we got to a place where even the federal government recognized that this would be the standard, that lingua franca for how we would store data across a claim or a medical record or even, some therapeutic data. So we could define one data model for the industry. So it's no longer wouldn't be proprietary systems. We've heard of that word, where someone stores it in the format that they've optimized for themselves, but no one can access that data. And so we think it's such a foundational concept that this isn't about trying to figure out how to use the old data. This is about setting a framework for the next generation of computing. And that's really important. It's like we moved from mainframes to cloud computing. We moved from legacy data to modern data called FHIR. And in so doing, we change really what's possible. The key in making it happen, because really at the end of the day, very few companies ever really want to change. They change because of some other maybe exogenous reason. In this case, the federal government, the Center for Medicaid and Medicaid Services, they changed the need for payers, insurance companies, to be able to provide data for their Medicare and Medicaid patients in FHIR format so that patients could access that data and make a request and get it. And so we started the motion going forward in the industry now where all of the stakeholders are going to need to have their data stored in FHIR. And now we have a chance of computing together.
Well, that's a big win, actually.
Yeah, huge.
Yeah. Usually it's the other way around, right? Where the private comes first and then the public. But
yeah, partially it's because we spend probably north of almost $800 billion just on Medicare. And the federal government foots that bill, and they're getting a little tired of how expensive it's getting, and they're not feeling like we're getting better care. So, they're going to start to use the leverage that they have, which is actually really good for all of us at the end of the day. Who wants to spend more money and get less care? No one.
Absolutely not.
All right. So let's dig into this a little bit more. What is the challenge today that hasn't been met, and where are we heading, and what are the hurdles that exist still?
Yeah. So it's a great question. The challenge, first of all, is that you really do have all of these trillions of pieces of data in old file formats. And so the first thing is you actually have to map them to the new format. It's almost like translating Latin into English. And then you have to then take all those words and push them into a new repository. No one's reading Latin anymore. We read in English. And so you want to be able to work in that current language, here, this data format. So the first step is a bunch of work. It's like, digging a ditch of some sort. Like, it's just hard mapping the data, having the right technology, and then being able to put it in the cloud. So part one is having those resources and having the skills to do that. Part two is that a lot of the data systems today that they use don't use FHIR data. So this is new. And so they have to think about, well, how do I have these two systems coexist? Am I starting a second system? So there's some architectural considerations for the clients to think about. And then the third is that, for the most part, very few companies want to change from platforms they're on. They like staying where they are. It's easier. They don't want to sort of disrupt their lives. But in this instance, the only way they're going to get any improvement is to make this kind of change. So while they might be reluctant for a little while, really at the end of the day, I think we'll see this shift happening in the next 3 to 5 years, to where if we were doing this show again in 5 years from now, we could confidently say that all patients, members, one day call them customers, have their data stored in FHIR, whether it's at a provider, a payer, a pharma company, or on their own phone, and we can all work together.
Joe, I'm curious about the impact the pandemic has had on healthcare data. I know that through collaboration, scientists were able to synthesize more data, more information faster, which ultimately resulted in the ability to deliver vaccines, or even work on therapeutics and things of that sort. Are you seeing more of that moving forward? I mean, will we see more collaboration in this kind of data? Does that facilitate that? What are your thoughts?
Well, for sure. So like a clinical trial that any of the big pharma companies would run would want to be able to, and some of these guys use our system and they want the data in FHIR because it is the way to be able to take the medical data that they're tracking and put it into this standard format. Even if it was only just a list of who these patients were in a standard format. So yeah, absolutely, it's going to help clinical data registries keep track and manage that clinical trial process using standard format. At that very high-end analytical space where they're really running like machine learning and AI algorithms, you'll start to see that once we have the totality of all this data available, that it'll be another mechanism to run population level analytics that we cannot get to today. And with that insight, we should be able to draw better conclusions. So yeah, this is going to not just empower sort of the administrative processes, but also clinical processes as well.
So many years ago, I went from the traditional IT services space, very mature supply chain, enterprise resource planning solutions, into the ad tech world, which was very fragmented, mostly running on spreadsheet. There were a lot of technology advancements in traditional manufacturing that were very easily transferable into that space. And it took decades to actually see that come to fruition.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just curious, what matured industries that have evolved their use of data, their applications of data, can be leveraged in the healthcare space? Are you seeing some connections that can be brought to bear so that can speed things up?
Yeah, so one of the things that we all know is that our phone, which here, right, has a lot of apps on it, and it uses a technology like JSON, and it uses a network. We don't have to recreate this. So when we started in retail 25 years ago, putting barcodes on merchandise and scanning, there wasn't a smartphone. So today, if you or I were to start a web company, it would be easy because we would use all the technologies, and it's going to be easier in healthcare because of that. Because FHIR is connected and leverages this JSON technology, and it's going to leverage a lot of the other web capabilities on a networking level, on a security level. We're leveraging a lot of just the standards that have evolved in the industry. FHIR was sort of the last component of that because you needed a data model in the healthcare space. But yeah, I do think we're going to be able to accelerate, maybe not faster than 5 years, but certainly not 20 years like it took other industries. Because the second part is the consumer expectations are just higher and higher. Like the idea that you show up at a doctor's office and fill out a piece of paper, and then maybe you could get a fax for a follow-up, and you have to make 7 phone calls to get an appointment, and then you have to bring your medical record with you if you needed to bring data. It just seems, unsatisfying and unacceptable anymore. So expectations on behalf of the consumer are going to also accelerate the move in this direction, because really at the end of the day, I mean, look, I don't know if a patient wants to be called a customer, but really they are. They're the ones consuming the service. And it's not for the hospital, the reason why we have the service. It's because of the patient. So it really should align to the way they want to live and how they want to be treated one day.
Yeah, and I think you make a good point. Like as a patient, as a consumer, not only do we have these expectations with other services that we're utilizing that should and we expect to be transferred to the medical community, but it's a space that we ourselves as individuals are completely unfamiliar with. And so if you expect the patient to come in remembering what the process was, what the name of the test that they've been run, this or that, the results, in a vocabulary that they're completely unfamiliar with, can't remember over this period of time, it's really kind of not only unreasonable, it's absolutely unfair. So let's talk a little bit about healthcare in general. And I know that you've held executive leadership roles, SaaS companies all across the board, retail, finance, digital marketing. What was it that pushed you to move into healthcare?
Yeah, this is a great question, because I think I have 2 really, I think, solid answers. One, there is no higher purpose. Maybe fixing the education system, which I tried to do. That one's somewhat intractable. So I went at the bigger problem, healthcare. This one serves all of our needs. Look, we all want to live a longer, happier, healthier life, and at a cost that should be manageable, and it should be equal and fair amongst all of us. And that is a very noble cause. The second is, as I've gone on my own personal journey around high performance and trying to understand, you can run 70 miles a week or 100 miles a week and do all these other exercises and eat the right stuff, and you sort of have no idea if that's really working or not. It's very surface level. So I'm intently curious about the data that I can see, even if it's just blood markers and other indicators that could help inform how I would like to live. And that data is very difficult to get to. And so I would love to have that data available in an app on my phone that would historically show me, and I could track activity versus what I do, versus how I eat, versus what my blood markers are telling me. And I could alter my performance, or at least understand that. I think that's at a very individual level. So I was really curious if we could do something there. But really more broadly, the industries and incumbents don't change themselves. Really, the truth of the matter is, look, General Motors and every other car company in the world had an opportunity to build a battery-driven car, we call it electric car, But it took Elon Musk to say, I'm from the outside and I'm going to go do this. And look what happened. For at least now, he's built the most valuable company in the world, and he has a market lead that no one will really catch up to him because he's got more data than anyone else, not just cars with batteries. And so in this instance, all of the sort of incumbents are reluctant to shift because they've built proprietary systems. They have an embedded interest in the way the system works today. And so they're not going to do much to change. So you need new entrants like One Up Health who are going to challenge convention, who are going to bring new concepts and new approaches. And I love that. It's what I've spent most of my life on, which is taking on big, hard problems and working on them, and trying to really help everyone else along the way.
It goes to what you said at the very beginning of the show about your purpose and your legacy. So you found the purpose with high impact and the legacy of how you're going to change an entire industry. I heard the saying once, something about when you've planted a tree whose shade you will not stand in, you're beginning to understand the meaning of life. And I think I see that with you in the One Up Health. Like maybe this availability to data and something as specific as you're talking about, your own blood work and thing is a tech that you might not be able to see in your lifetime, hopefully so. But you're planting this tree and this amazing tree. And thank you for that.
Oh yeah, you're welcome. I think, the other part that where there is some magic that we're trying to work on here is, after all these years, you learn some lessons. And one of them, back to sort of even my lifestyle, is the last thing you should do is tell someone how to live. We know that doesn't work. I can't tell someone you should be a vegetarian, or you should exercise every day, or you should write, or any of the things I've chosen. But what you can do is you can always work on building infrastructure and the idea benefits that they might have access to and that they might want to integrate into the way that they live, if you can show them how their lives will get better. And so here, what we're doing is we're going to go off and do something that the industry needs someone to do. Well, the federal government said you have to start down that path. We have some broader industry perspectives that say that this does make a difference. And so we're a good actor in that way. We're out doing this stuff that's sort of at that foundation level. Cisco did it for the networking industry. Companies like IBM did it at compute level. Amazon did it for us. They went out and did some stuff that we weren't going to do on our own. But now, years later, we look at them as sort of obvious answers, and we will soon be one of those, because already we have over 30 million member lives on our platform, billions of resources, and we just started. We're only at this for a little more than 2 years. So, with a little bit of time and sort of this intuition about how to become sort of integrated in like a Trojan horse of some sort, you have a chance to make a big impact.
It's interesting. I'm listening to you, going back to the consumer, and, after 33 years, you see patterns in the industry, right? And clearly the accessibility to data improved way before the customer experience started becoming a critical path to success, to having good user experiences, good relationship with customers. But you couldn't get to that without the data, right? Mm-hmm. So the data in itself was useless until it became applicable into something that actually created a better experience. Are we in the same sort of space right now with healthcare? The data is becoming available and accessible, but the idea of customer experience or patient experience, it sounds kind of foreign to me, because everybody's always complaining that it's kind of a clinical thing, right? You're treated like a patient versus a customer, as we were talking about earlier. How will this shift, do you think, to actually creating better experiences for when you go to the doctor or the hospital or you need care? Do you see that moving in that direction? And who are going to be the leaders in that space, you think?
Yeah, Tulio, a couple of things. One, the pandemic did make one of the big shifts, right? Which is that remote care in healthcare started to actually get some momentum. And so that actually starts to give consumer choice, because you don't have to have the doctor down the street, or, even you can just go get a blood test just with an order, and you can go do that on your own. So we're seeing the beginnings of some shifts happening in how care is delivered, whether it's for very remote areas, rural areas in the country, or even inner city. So that's one shift that'll change the customer experience. The second is that there are new groups being formed that are rethinking, how care could be delivered. And so maybe it's not the large integrated medical systems in a city, but there are other groups of physicians who are delivering care differently. all of them are thinking about that customer experience because they're trying to provide an alternative. And in so doing, they're going to need the data. And the data, it's also that connection, right? So interoperable means that you can both act on it at the same time, and so, remember what it was like if you wanted to send some money to someone years ago. You could only send them a check. Maybe you could go to Western Union. Now we can use Venmo or Zelle or something, and you can just send it electronically. That is all about data and interoperability standards, right? Changes your experiences. And banks were difficult, really, to say the least. We can go into 10 other examples of how they've changed. And so, but the new entrants are the starting point. And we're talking to some of the bigger players who are starting to say, hey, what if we could do this? And what if we could do that? So you're going to see it happen and bubble up through new entrants, new markets, new ways of delivery. All are going to be empowered by the data and the connections that allow for you to both act on that data.
Very cool. So we're coming to the final few minutes of our show today. And I, of course, I have two questions for you. The first is, what exactly is OneUp's Health role in this? How are you helping to make this interoperability a reality? And number two, let's talk about OneUp Health and what it's like to work with you and for you, a bit of that company culture.
Yeah, well, we're actually a managed service platform in the cloud. So we will help you take your data, convert that data, put it in a platform, make it secure, make it accessible and computable. So we're a cloud software as a service platform provider. So complete end to end, we believe the most complete in the industry. As a company, one of my goals is to make sure that we're as contemporary as a company as we are as a solution provider. So we want to build an organization that, brings with it the values of today, one of inclusivity and diversity, a place where people feel valued and listened to, where they feel challenged and engaged, where, some of the compute technologies they get to work on is like the coolest stuff in the world. But we also, want to be able to bring new ways of thinking and being. So you'll see us, over time launch a really different feeling website, or, our marketing will feel different. So, but our value system, we have 4 core values in the company. The first is to be human. We could talk about what that really means, but, it starts with respect and feeling valued. The second is being bold. Of course, as a new entrant, you have to be bold. You can't be afraid. We're visionary as well. We're going to drive a point of view in this industry, and we're resolute. If we tell you we're going to get it done, we get it done. I bring that from my life, which is I make a commitment to you. I'm going to deliver on it. We're going to do the same into the market, into our customers, into our employees. We think those 4 core values define sort of an organization that people would like to be part of. In the world where everyone's sort of back and forth about whether it's remote work or you got to go to an office, we think that that's like the wrong question. What we want to do is create a work environment where you get to choose how you work and where you work. We don't count the hours that you work. We count the output that you create. We think the collaboration is critical. So if you want to show up in the office that we have, then bring a team together and have a meeting. We have annual events where we all get together and share time with each other. But there are some people who work for the company who we may never see because they just do a good job remotely. So we're the place where you're not going to feel like we're ever going to be the they people who did this to us, right? Oh, they did it to us, or he did that. Like, that's gone and long gone. If you want to be competitive in this world where, look, it's hard to recruit and attract really good technical talent, we think we have a great technical story with technologies we're working on, whether it's machine learning or AI, whether it's in the FHIR world or the large scale compute world, but also just a place back to, again, where we're human, bold, visionary, and resolute. And we think that brings just a great feeling for everyone who wants to be involved.
Love it. Great lessons for companies still on the fence, debating, come to the office, stay from home. I mean, just treat people like adults and with respect. You don't need to tell them how to do their job. They can figure it out and deliver value on their own terms. You tell children how to do things because they don't know. So stop treating people like children. That's what I've heard loud and clear, part of keeping respect for and being human. So congratulations on that. We're up on time. I just have one final question for you. You've built companies before. You've accomplished a lot. You've pushed the envelope, both physically, emotionally, and in the business world. What lessons have you learned in doing this new adventure, which is a major disruption into an industry?
I think that one of the big lessons is, counting on people who come from the industry. We hired actually Don Rucker, who came from the ONC, who was part of the rule maker, bringing in people who are experts. In my role, I'm not supposed to be the answer person, right? I'm supposed to have a group of people who actually know how to get the work done. So trusting them, hiring great people, counting on others, right? More than just trying to sort of always, being the big man on campus, as we used to say. So I think that's one lesson, because I had not worked in the healthcare industry for quite some time. So I had to make sure I surrounded myself there. I think the other thing is, you have to, when you're a new entrant, you have to sort of keep a light attitude every once in a while, because it can feel hard. And I always try and encourage everyone, like, look, we're on a long journey, and that's okay, because we should enjoy the journey. The outcomes will come. And that's a good lesson all the time. And then, I think sometimes being a CEO, you run the risk of losing your sense of humor, because you take everything you do so seriously. So I advise that a good laugh every once in a while, not taking yourself too seriously, is a good way of thinking about life in general, and something that I try to remind my management team about all the time here.
Good advice. Thanks for being with us with us today, and for sharing this with us. We wish you a lot of success. Stay as we go off the air in just a second. Kim, what else we got coming up? We got
three. We actually have three. So we've got 2 more noon shows, and we actually do have a design thinking show coming up on Thursday. So first up will be tomorrow, Wednesday, May 4th. We'll be speaking with Morgan Howell, who's the founder and CTO of Stock Alarm. The topic of conversation is democratizing financial markets with accessible tooling, really wanting to know why it's important to make traditional high-tech products accessible to folks from all backgrounds. That will be 12 o'clock. We also have a 10 o'clock show, the Design Thinking Show with Tulio, that will be coming up on Thursday morning, and that's with Sky Flow. And then on Thursday afternoon at 12 o'clock, we're going to be talking with Matthew von Burskirk, I think, with Hummingbird. I do not have that topic quite yet, but it's going to be a good one, like they always are.
So don't forget to come and learn with us. Dojo.live. It's that simple. See you back tomorrow at noon.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you very much.